My name is Maya Thornton. I'm 32, and I never thought I'd hear someone in my own family say those words to me with a smile. But that night, as I walked into the rooftop restaurant holding a gift I'd spent days picking out, everything snapped into focus. I barely had time to look around before the laughter hit first, bright, rehearsed, already warmed up without me. Then I saw her hand flick in my direction, casual and dismissive, pointing toward a fold-out chair shoved next to a trash can. The meaning was instant, sharp, deliberate. "Sorry, this table's for family only." No explanation, no room to pretend I misunderstood. Just a smirk, a gesture, and an entire room pretending it was normal to exile someone who had paid for the entire reservation. I sat down because I didn't know what else to do. For months I had told myself that if I kept showing up, one day things would change. That people eventually see the person who quietly holds everything together. But as I sat alone with my unopened gift and a glass of water I never asked for, it hit me that this wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. It was a message. One they expected me to swallow without protest. What they didn't expect was what happened when the bill arrived, $3,500, and every eye turned to me. Before I tell you what I said next, and what followed after I walked away from that table, tell me this. What time is it where you are? And where are you listening from? I'm curious how far this story will reach. The week moved forward with a kind of slow, grinding momentum that left little room to breathe. I kept telling myself that handling the logistics would calm the tension sitting under my skin, so I opened my laptop and began searching for a venue that matched the level of celebration everyone seemed determined to project. A new rooftop restaurant in downtown Madison had been trending online, the type of place that cared more about ambience than comfort, but it offered a private dining space with full-service coordination. That alone made it feel like the safest choice, or at least the most controlled one. Once I called and secured the reservation, the manager walked me through the available menus, floral setups, and layout options. Each suggestion seemed to carry a hidden price tag, yet saying no felt impossible. I could hear the manager typing as I approved details one by one, each item sliding neatly onto the card I had given them. The deposit, non-refundable naturally, was processed with a soft chime from my banking app. It wasn't a small amount, but I had long ago stopped measuring generosity by numbers. Responsibility had a way of becoming habitual. When I texted a confirmation screenshot to Gloria Thornton, she responded within seconds, delighted by the aesthetic possibilities. Her messages poured in like rapid-fire directives. Fresh lilies instead of roses, real linen napkins, an upgraded dessert display for photo purposes. She spoke in absolutes. "This will look better. That's too plain. We should elevate the table decor." I hardly needed to ask who "we" referred to. At no point did she mention reimbursement, but after years of similar patterns, the omission no longer surprised me. Douglas Thornton reacted differently. He sent a brief acknowledgement, the kind that avoided emotional commentary but carried an unmistakable subtext. Good. Handle it. He had perfected the art of stepping aside while still benefiting from every outcome. His silence worked like a gentle nudge, reminding me there would be consequences if anything fell below the family's expectations. The requests escalated as the date approached. A custom welcome sign, specialty mocktails that required a separate fee, an arrangement of candles that needed hazard clearance from the venue. I accepted each new task with a steady voice, even as the tally rose behind it. Logic told me I should draw a line, but something quieter pushed against that instinct, an old belief that fulfilling every demand might earn me a place at the center rather than the edge. Even Chloe Thornton chimed in occasionally, always upbeat, always certain her ideas improved the event. Her tone held the confidence of someone who expected the world to mold itself around her preferences. She sent inspiration photos, color palettes, and captions, crafted as if the night were already a social media victory. None of it acknowledged who was facilitating the work. It was simply assumed. I kept receipts in a folder on my desktop, though I couldn't articulate why. Maybe part of me wanted proof that I hadn't imagined the imbalance. Or maybe I just needed something tangible to hold when the emotional cost became harder to quantify. But even that small act felt secretive, as if preparing documentation meant betraying the unspoken agreement that I would carry whatever weight the family handed me. As the final week settled in, I visited the venue in person. The space was airy, framed by tall windows that held a view of the Capitol building. Staff members moved about with curated efficiency, adjusting place settings and polishing stemware. I confirmed arrival times, reviewed the lighting plan, and double-checked the seating layout. It felt strange standing in the room alone, imagining the gathering that would soon fill it. Part of me hoped that a flawless environment might soften whatever harshness lingered between us. The night before the event, I laid out my clothes, wrapped the engagement gift, and reviewed the confirmation email one last time. The total charges listed at the bottom were higher than I expected, though nothing in the breakdown surprised me. Every decision made by someone else had found its way onto my bill, yet I still told myself that showing up fully, prepared, composed, supportive, might finally shift the dynamic that had shaped so much of my life. I went to bed early, determined to face the next evening with a steady mind. There was no point rehearsing conversations or inventing scenarios where things unfolded differently. All I could do was step into the night exactly as it had been arranged and hope that, for once, effort might be recognized instead of absorbed into oblivion. The next evening moved forward with a kind of strange detachment, as if I were drifting alongside the version of myself that had carefully curated every detail. I arrived a few minutes early, carrying the wrapped gift that had felt meaningful when I picked it out. The host recognized my name on the reservation and guided me toward the private room. The clatter of silverware and the low pulse of background music grew louder as we approached, and a surge of heat climbed my spine. I steadied my breath before stepping inside. The room was already full. Conversations overlapped in a lively hum, shaped by the sort of brightness people adopt when they believe the night belongs to them. At the center stood Chloe Thornton, radiant in a dress chosen for maximum attention. She lifted a champagne flute as someone snapped a photo, her expression fixed in triumph. I waited for her to notice me, but her eyes slid past like I was an unfamiliar shadow. When she finally paused, a slow smile curved onto her face, one that felt practiced and faintly satisfied. Her hand lifted, almost graceful in its dismissal, directing me toward a narrow space near the back. A fold-out chair sat against a utility wall, angled beside a stainless steel trash can lined with fresh bags. The placement wasn't accidental. It was intentional enough that the meaning stung before I could suppress the reaction. I walked toward it, each step quiet, my gift resting lightly in my grip. The room didn't fall silent. It simply shifted, the laughter smoothing into something edged with amusement. Sitting on the metal chair, I kept my back straight. A server approached and placed a glass of water on the small ledge beside me. No menu. No offer of anything beyond the bare minimum. I thanked him anyway, adjusting the hem of my dress to steady myself. Across the room, flashes from phone cameras burst around Chloe as she leaned into the attention with unrestrained ease. The table arrangement around her looked exactly like the mood board she had sent earlier, a curated celebration built on decisions she never had to execute. Time passed in uneven stretches. I watched groups merge into conversation clusters, watched plates of appetizers circulate, watched the ease with which everyone took their place. My chair remained anchored in its corner, part of the room but outside its purpose. I tried not to interpret it as a reflection of my worth, though the symbolism was too stark to ignore. I held the gift on my lap, fingers tracing the ribbon whenever the sting of exclusion sharpened. The hum of approval around Chloe kept rising, carrying her higher while pushing me further toward irrelevance. An hour slipped by, then more. When glasses clinked and a toast began at the main table, I stayed still. No eyes turned my way. No gesture invited me closer. The realization settled with a quiet heaviness. The work I had done, the money I had spent, the arrangements I had handled were invisible the moment they no longer served anyone else. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was part of the infrastructure. Near the end of the evening, a server approached with a leather folio in his hands. His expression held a polite uncertainty, the kind staff adopt when they know a moment might become unpleasant. He paused beside me and lowered his voice to confirm my identity. Inside the folio sat the final total, $3,500. The number didn't surprise me, but the expectation behind it nearly did. Across the room, I felt Chloe watching. Her posture was relaxed, almost indulgent, as if the arrangement had unfolded exactly as she wanted. Conversations quieted enough that the tension sharpened. The server asked if he should process the card that had been used for the reservation. It was a simple question, one he asked with no knowledge of the weight behind it. My answer had already formed. I rose from the chair, smoothing my dress as I stepped forward. The room shifted its attention, subtle but undeniable. I met the server's gaze first, then let my eyes move across the tables until they reached the center where Chloe sat, her expression caught between pleasure and surprise. The silence felt suspended, waiting. Not my table. The words left my mouth steady and unforced, carrying the truth I had swallowed for far too long. The reaction around me was immediate, a ripple of stunned stillness, yet none of it demanded a response from me. I turned away from the table, leaving the folio exactly where it had been presented. A brief stillness followed as I stepped away from the fold-out chair, and the quiet carried a weight that felt heavier than the words I had spoken. I kept my movements deliberate, not rushed, not hesitant. The room watched with an attention it had never offered earlier, and for once, the gaze didn't make me shrink. The server remained frozen with the leather folio in his hands, uncertain whether to follow me or retreat. I gave him a small nod, not of apology but acknowledgement. He was simply caught in the crossfire of something he hadn't created. His shoulders softened as if he understood. It was the first gesture of genuine neutrality I'd felt all evening. Across the room, Chloe Thornton straightened in her seat. The veneer of effortless composure on her face faltered, pulling tight around her eyes. The symmetry of her confidence wavered as she tried to regain control of the moment. The lighting from the overhead fixtures cast sharp angles across her expression, revealing the tension she usually hid so well. Her hands tightened around her champagne flute, the posture tense enough to strain. Near her, Jason Abbott lowered his glass slowly, his confusion unmasked. His attention moved between the folio, the server, and Chloe, as if trying to reconcile the pieces. He didn't rise, didn't intervene, didn't call my name. The absence of action carried its own clarity. Then Gloria Thornton shifted in her chair. The reaction came not with volume, but with tight displeasure, the kind sharpened by years of believing that any disruption reflected poorly on her. Her lips formed a careful expression meant to soften the edges of the scene, though the strain in her jaw betrayed her panic. She looked toward the guests as if assessing the damage to her curated image. Beside her, Douglas Thornton leaned forward, bracing his elbows on the table in a posture he used whenever tension escalated. His eyes narrowed with the sort of irritation that masked deeper unease. I could feel him preparing the familiar script, the steady push for compliance disguised as practicality. Yet he didn't speak. He watched instead, and the silence settled heavily between us. A few seats down, Marjorie Abbott and Thomas Abbott sat rigidly upright. Their expressions were sharper, more discerning than I had anticipated. They didn't exchange glances. They simply observed with the attentiveness of people recalculating the situation in real time. Their scrutiny had none of the politeness usually offered to future in-laws. It held the cool distance of individuals questioning a partnership they were about to sanction. I stood near the entrance of the private room, allowing the entire scene to unfold without inserting myself back into it. Years of absorbing slights had trained me to internalize everything. Yet standing there, the dynamic shifted. Their reactions no longer washed over me as inevitabilities. I was watching them instead. The server finally moved, placing the folio gently on the main table. Its weight seemed insignificant, yet the effect was immediate. The gesture forced everyone to acknowledge what they had been trying to ignore. The responsibility belonged somewhere, and for once, it wouldn't be hidden behind my willingness to absorb it. The silence stretched. A fork slipped against a plate, the faint metal scrape cutting through the tension before dissolving into stillness again. Chloe's eyes darted toward her parents, then toward Jason, searching for reinforcement. But no one offered the immediate support she expected. The lack of synchronized approval unsettled her more than my refusal ever could. I remained where I was, neither defensive nor apologetic. The air in the room shifted subtly as people registered that I wasn't returning to the table, wasn't smoothing over the situation, wasn't retreating into compliance. I wasn't waiting for a verdict or permission. I had already made my choice. The path to the hallway felt strangely open, as if the room itself no longer held the same gravitational pull. My steps were measured as I moved toward the exit, not hurried, but certain. I didn't look back for validation or acknowledgement. The energy behind me trembled with the realization that the structure they relied on had cracked. As I reached the doorway, the muted sounds of the restaurant beyond the private room, clinking glasses, soft conversations, ambient music, washed over me like a different world entirely. The contrast sharpened the reality inside the room. Their celebration had continued without me until the moment I refused to play my designated role. I stepped through the doorway and let the muted light of the hallway guide my way forward, leaving behind the curated illusion that had held me in place for so long. The hours that followed unfolded with an unsettling clarity. Once I stepped into the quieter evening air, the contrast from the private room felt sharp enough to sting. I walked toward the parking garage without glancing back, letting the cool breeze settle the tension that had collected along my shoulders. The city lights flickered against the metallic surfaces around me, and for the first time that night, I felt completely in control of my steps. When I reached my car, the stillness inside worked like a slow exhale. I rested my hands on the steering wheel, letting the silence settle after the relentless noise of the evening. The moment held a calm that felt almost foreign, but the reprieve didn't last. My phone lit up with the first vibration, a faint buzz on the console, then another. The notifications grew in rapid sequence until the sound became a steady pulse, each alert a reminder of the chaos I had left behind. I didn't check the messages immediately. I started the engine and pulled onto the main road, driving toward my apartment with a steadiness that surprised me. Only when I parked outside my building did I finally gather enough resolve to look at the screen. The list of messages stretched endlessly: missed calls, long text threads, fragments of urgency and accusation. Each sender carried a different shade of panic. Chloe Thornton filled the top of the screen. Her messages came in quick bursts, carrying an insistence sharpened by disbelief. The tone shifted from outrage to self-preservation, pushing blame outward with every line. She framed the evening as if the disruption had been orchestrated by me rather than built on choices she had crafted. Her words pressed heavily against the screen, carrying a familiar expectation that I would fold, rationalize, apologize. Next were the messages from Gloria Thornton, written with the tone she used whenever appearances were threatened. The sentences carried an undercurrent of disappointment meant to steer me back into place. Each line pressed for explanation, demanding a justification for behavior that embarrassed her more than it surprised her. Her concern wasn't directed toward the cruelty of the seating arrangement or the imbalance of responsibility. It circled the single idea that my refusal had undermined the image she worked so hard to maintain. Messages from Douglas Thornton carried a different angle. His words were simpler, narrower, weighted with the implication that the quickest solution was compliance. He urged me to contact the venue, settle the bill, avoid further tension. There was no acknowledgement of the circumstances, no interest in understanding the dynamic behind the decision. Only a practical demand: repair the situation before it spiraled. I scrolled without responding. The notifications blurred together, forming a sort of digital haze. I set the phone down, letting the screen go dark, and stepped inside my apartment. The quiet was grounding. I placed the engagement gift on the dining table and moved toward the kitchen sink to wash my hands, letting the warm water run over my fingers longer than necessary. The phone lit up again from across the room. This time, the caller ID displayed a name I hadn't expected: Marjorie Abbott. The sight of it sent a ripple of unease through me. I didn't answer. The call ended, then resumed with a new number. Another vibration followed, then a voicemail notification. I listened only when the calls paused. Her voice carried none of the polished composure she maintained at the dinner. It held something colder, more analytical, shaped by a need for clarity rather than sympathy. She spoke as someone who had begun examining the evening from a distance, reassembling the details that no longer aligned with the version presented to her. Her words were measured, revealing that questions had formed, questions about payment, intention, and integrity. After the voicemail ended, I sat on the edge of my sofa and breathed deeply. The air felt heavier now, thick with the anticipation of consequences that had shifted beyond the boundaries of my family. The silence after her voice faded wasn't soothing. It carried a weight that settled across my thoughts, reshaping them. When the phone buzzed again, an email arrived from Jason Abbott instead of a call. The subject line carried a formality that tightened my chest. He wrote with restraint, careful not to accuse, but the implication lived beneath every sentence. He wanted to understand the reservation details, the financial arrangement, the unfolding dynamic that had cast a shadow over the evening. His tone wasn't hostile, but the distance within it was unmistakable. I read the email twice, absorbing the layered uncertainty beneath its structured politeness. It felt like the moment the evening shifted from a personal boundary to something broader, an unraveling that no longer revolved solely around me. I closed the laptop gently and let the quiet return, settling into the room with a tension that refused to dissolve. By the next morning, the fallout had sharpened into something far more defined. I woke to a stream of notifications that filled my home screen before I could even unlock the phone. The quiet of my apartment felt detached from the intensity pressing through the device, as if two separate realities were unfolding. One in the room around me, and one through the people demanding answers. The family group thread had exploded overnight. I didn't open it fully. The preview lines were enough to see the tone. Urgency layered with indignation, all braided around the assumption that I would eventually bend. Their messages described the situation as if it were a temporary misunderstanding I had the power, no, the obligation, to repair. None of them asked what had led to the decision. They only asked why I had forced a scene. I set the phone aside and allowed myself a moment of stillness. The calm felt earned, not fragile. It didn't last long. A new text appeared from a contact I rarely heard from unless my mother wanted me managed. Riley Summers, my cousin. Her messages carried no urgency, just a simple request to call when I was ready. The absence of pressure alone made it easier to respond. When I phoned her back, Riley's voice held a steadiness that felt grounding. She didn't ask for explanations. She didn't question my decision. She went straight to what mattered, acknowledging the patterns she had noticed for years. The unspoken expectation that I would cover the responsibilities no one else wanted. She didn't call it loyalty or generosity. She named it accurately imbalance, exploited to the point of invisibility. Her clarity worked like a lens. With each sentence, the weight of the previous night rearranged itself into something sharper. She pointed out what I hadn't yet processed: financial ties lingering from past emergencies, accounts I had opened during times when Chloe needed help, arrangements I hadn't revisited because I kept assuming they'd resolve on their own. Riley urged me to check everything with precision, not sentiment. After the call ended, I opened my laptop and signed into the accounts I had neglected. The reality surfaced quickly. An old joint account still held my name as the primary owner. A secondary card linked to my profile remained active, attached to charges spaced across several months. Nothing catastrophic in isolation, but collectively, it formed a pattern I could no longer justify ignoring. I closed the secondary card first, then transferred the remaining balance into a secure account and requested the joint access be terminated entirely. Each step felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had gradually handed away without noticing. An hour later, my phone started vibrating again. Chloe Thornton was calling. When I didn't answer, she tried twice more, then shifted to texts. The tone had shifted dramatically from the night before. Gone was the confidence, the insistence, the casual disregard. The messages carried panic. Short, abrupt sentences fragmented by confusion. The subtext was unmistakable. She had attempted to use a card she assumed was still available to her. The decline must have been immediate. I didn't reply. I didn't owe her an explanation for boundaries she had long pretended not to see. A new email arrived shortly after, this one from Jason Abbott. The formality present in his previous message had dissolved into something sharper, more deliberate. He had spoken to the venue, reviewed the reservation records, and contacted staff. His message articulated what I suspected he had begun unraveling the moment he left the dinner. The narrative Chloe had given him no longer aligned with the facts. He didn't express anger directly. He didn't have to. The distance in his words carried enough finality. By afternoon, another notification arrived, this time from Marjorie. Not a call, not a voicemail, a concise email. She thanked me for clarifying earlier details, acknowledged the discrepancies between stories, and informed me that the engagement had been formally called off. The phrasing was cold, structured, stripped of emotion. It read like the conclusion of a matter reviewed and closed. As I finished reading, my phone buzzed again with one final text from Chloe, long, frantic, spiraling, reaching for someone to absorb the chaos now crashing around her. I read the first few lines, then let the screen fade to black. Nothing in her unraveling belonged to me. The room around me remained steady, quiet, and clear. For the first time in years, the center of the storm wasn't pulling me in. In the days that followed, the consequences settled with a clarity none of them could redirect. It didn't happen dramatically or all at once. The unraveling came through logistical emails, financial statements, and strained silences that revealed more than any argument could. I watched it unfold from a distance, not as a participant, but as someone who had finally stepped out of a role she had never agreed to play. The first shift came through a forwarded notice addressed to Gloria Thornton and Douglas Thornton. The venue's cancellation fees had been applied in full. The cost of the floral arrangements, the upgraded linens, the specialty displays, everything they had insisted upon was now itemized and charged directly to them. What once looked like curated luxury became a line of undeniable expenses. Their reaction arrived secondhand through clipped messages that carried no real admission of responsibility, only frustration at the sudden weight of the bill now resting squarely on their own accounts. As for Chloe Thornton, her descent into crisis took shape through fragmented posts and rapidly deleted updates that reached me only because distant acquaintances still followed her. The engagement had dissolved publicly enough that questions circulated faster than explanations. She moved out of Jason's apartment with little ceremony, returning to my parents' house with a careful smile in the single photo she left up, an expression stretched thin, far from the confidence she once wore so easily. A quiet note from Marjorie Abbott came later. It wasn't addressed to me directly, but someone forwarded it, knowing it held relevance. She expressed regret that the partnership had reached a point where trust could no longer be extended. Her tone remained professional, but the finality was unmistakable. She didn't mention me at all, which somehow made the truth sharper. The rupture hadn't originated with my refusal, it had been revealed by it. I kept my distance, not out of anger, but out of clarity. The group thread that once tugged at my attention now sat muted, its notifications sealed behind a barrier I no longer felt responsible to cross. Messages trickled in from time to time, brief updates, attempts to reopen familiar channels, but I didn't respond. My silence wasn't punitive. It was protective. Instead, I devoted my energy to stabilizing the areas of my life I had neglected. I met with a financial advisor to reorganize accounts, ensuring that old entanglements no longer carried hidden vulnerabilities. I scheduled sessions with a therapist who helped me articulate patterns I had long felt but never named. The conversations were grounding in a way I hadn't expected. They reframed years of imbalance into something visible, something I could finally choose to step away from. Small changes followed. I created a routine that centered my own needs instead of adjusting to the weight of others. I spent evenings reading on my balcony, letting the quiet feel like something earned rather than accidental. I booked a weekend trip to a coastal town I had always put off visiting. For once, the decision wasn't about timing, convenience, or family obligations. It was simply because I wanted to go. The distance from the Thornton household grew into something permanent, not hostile. My parents continued reaching out sporadically, using short, careful messages that avoided referencing the past. I didn't return the effort beyond measured acknowledgments. There was no anger left to resolve, no confrontation waiting to happen. Some relationships don't break. They dissolve into honesty. Chloe attempted one last message, a long, uneven apology blended with rationalizations and the hope that time might soften what had happened. I read it without response. Her frustration, her unraveling, her consequences, they were no longer mine to shoulder. Understanding that felt like the final step in reclaiming the parts of myself I had once offered without hesitation. What remained was perspective, the kind that comes only after stepping away from a structure that thrived on silence. I learned that boundaries aren't declarations, they're commitments. And the moment I refused to sit in that fold-out chair beside the trash can, I committed to my own worth in a way I never had before. If there is anything I hope others understand from this, it's that family is not defined by obligation or proximity. It is shaped by respect, honesty, and reciprocity. When those foundations disappear, stepping away isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation. Thank you for listening to my story. If it made you pause, reflect, or see your own experiences more clearly, feel free to share where you're watching from. Stories travel far, but the lessons we take from them travel even further.